What is up, Waffle Gang? I do hope you are well. My name is Mark, and today we're checking out some more Nightmare Neighbors. You know what I'm like with Nightmare Neighbors. I absolutely love it. And I was just browsing Reddit and I came across this thread that's called "What's the most petty thing a neighbor has done to you?" So let's get straight involved. And we'll start straight away with Snoozer854 saying, "Stole the windshield wipers off my car. I caught him on a security camera stealing them one night. Next day I went over to his house and told that some lowlife stole my damn wipers. The look he gave me was priceless. Don't think he liked me calling him a lowlife. After I told him I had him on video, he goes, 'Fine, take them back.' And that was the last time I spoke to him." What? It's just the cheek of this one, isn't it? It's like, "Fine, you can have them back this time." Cheeky bastard. And AB Guy 19 says, "Stole my trash bin because theirs got repossessed for lack of payment. Dumbasses thought I wouldn't know it was them. Trash collection company took my old trash bin away from them, gave me a brand new one, and gave me credit for having to deal with all this bullshit." And Girls PM says, I'm not reading the rest of that name, "A dorm neighbor was a huge dick and didn't care for anyone in the suite. So he did something like tip over his subwoofer, turn the music up and left for the weekend. The entire crew could feel it from our beds. I guess he didn't know the RAs have keys to the rooms. Maybe he also didn't know that you could get ejected from your dorms. Fuck you, Bosco. You turd." To which there was a reply from this one from Tragedy Porn Family Vid. God, another name. "A roommate did this during midterms in college with an annoying video clip. She set it to loop for 14 hours at max volume on her laptop and hooked up some speakers before leaving for the day. She locked it so I couldn't turn the noise off. She even thought to do something to disable the power button. So I pulled the battery out, waited 10 seconds and put it back in. Blissful silence. Unfortunately, there was a lot of unsafe work on that laptop. I'm still stunned someone would plan to leave their classwork for 16 plus hours without saving it, but would think to change the power key to make it harder to stop the noise. She was randomly assigned and the only person I've ever known who has had their co-workers stage a surprise intervention at their home to ask them why they're such an arsehole and how could this change. It was seriously 15 people all trying to figure out how to get her to stop being so indiscriminately nasty." Wow. And Siler Quick says, 2 years ago, my husband and I just bought our first house. I was so excited to finally have flower beds, so I bought 5 purple tiger rose bushes and went out every day to tend to them. Our next door neighbor came over one day while I was watering my roses and decided to be a creeper. Asked if he could give me his number, started asking probing questions about my schedule, like how long I was home alone, and kept hitting on me. I turned off the water and went inside, locked the door and called my husband because now there's a strange man walking through my yard that knows I'm home alone and won't accept my boundaries. My husband came home and met my neighbour's wife in the driveway to explain what happened and how the guy was out of line. Didn't see the guy again, but within days my roses started to shrivel up and die. I tried everything, but I'm pretty sure he sprayed them with plant killer. Karma's a bitch though, because he got fired for sexually harassing a customer shortly after, and his wife booted him out the house. It's always like, wow, the whole post is red flags, right? But it's always like huge red flags to me when they start taking it out on like plants or small animals or pets and stuff like that. It's like really creepy, right? And then Pachata says he's salty about a land survey that was done decades before I moved in. We have a decent neighbourly relationship in general, but when I moved in, he tried to convince me that a whole section of my yard was his. Fortunately, the previous owner had warned me he might try this. Now we rent the house out. Every time a new tenant moves in, he walks the property with them and tries to move the property line again. Very petty and so consistent. And Evil Bosch says, I live in a townhouse that has an adjacent townhouse on either side. The neighbours on one side are absolutely fantastic. About 2 years ago, there were renters on the other side, where the adult male living there was some sort of tradesman who regularly left for work at 4:40 AM. Whenever he left, he would slam his front metal gate closed, which would regularly wake me and my 4-year-old daughter. The gate is only about 10 meters from our bedroom windows. I wrote a very polite note explaining that it was a problem and asking if they could please close their gate quietly. To his credit, he started leaving via the other exit. About a month later, it became clear that my front lawn was increasingly covered in dog poo, so I set up a webcam to see where it was coming from. Very quickly it became clear that the neighbours were regularly opening their gate, letting the dog out to do its business and then return home, with no attempt to clear it up. I approached him one early evening as the dog returned home from his defecation excursion, and again very politely asked him and his wife to stop letting the dog leave its business on my front lawn. They denied it, despite the fact that I just caught the dog in the act and told them I had video evidence of what their dog was doing. The absolute arsehole decided that every morning he left for work, thereafter he would literally slam his front gate using all his strength. Some people are human garbage. Thankfully they moved out only a couple of months later. And this next one is from Nobody1. For context, I live on the corner, next to an empty lot. Neighbour lived on the street behind me, behind the empty lot. This old man used to walk his dog through his backyard, through the empty lot, stand next to the line of bushes that marked our property line, and send his dog through the bushes to our yard to do its business. Until I finally stood up from my spot on the porch one day to scream at him that if he didn't knock it off I was going to start tossing my dog's crap on his back porch. Which would have been easy to do because the back corner of my fence was only about 15 feet from his porch. Some people are just trash. That same neighbour had his grandkids living with him. The grandkids shot my Halloween pumpkins with a BB gun. They were horrible shots, so they also shot up the front of my house in the process. And those weren't even our worst neighbours in that house, but I just saw from the city council meeting minutes last week that the other one's property is being condemned. So, yay. And Prost Dog says our neighbours constantly complained for like 2 years about a tree in the backyard that looked like it was going to fall. They threatened to sue us if it did. Thing is, the tree was clearly on their property, like by 5 feet. Then one day during a storm, a huge, seemingly strong and healthy tree, smack dab in the middle of their front yard, blows over onto their house. We went over the next day and helped them cut it up and remove it. They could barely make eye contact with us and never said thank you. They did shut up about the other tree though, that's still standing to this day. Ooh, I like the way that you went and did that, went and helped them out. I bet that must have been so awkward, so gloriously awkward. Kill him with kindness is what I say. FH says, I was at this neighbourhood treasure hunt when I was around 11. It was in a big park with lots of trees and rocks, parking lot and a community centre next to it. Me and my neighbour's kid both figured out the final clue and sprinted towards the finish, only for me to accidentally get bumped by his dad and fall. Still salty about it till this day. And I would be too. Who does that at like a children's event? Oh man. Although you see it all the time these days at like kids sporting events and stuff, with parents going absolutely mental at the sidelines if their child didn't score a goal or something like that. It's really sad to see, isn't it? It really takes out the enjoyment from what they're doing. And 50 effing cabbages says 8 days ago, happy cake day. When we bought our place, my husband went next door to introduce himself to the new neighbour. Mr. C led with, I don't like dogs or children, you all better be quiet, and it didn't get better from there. He also took down the no trespassing sign that the previous owners had put up. That sign only faced Mr. C's property. The pettiest thing he did was probably the day he cut our cable because he thought the provider didn't bury it quickly enough. Mind you, it was entirely on our land. Or maybe the day he had a shit fit because the movers took down a fence post to get their truck in and inadvertently left it on Mr. C's lawn for 3 to 4 hours until they got the truck back out. Perhaps it was the morning that he came banging on the door at 7:30 AM, like there was some emergency, and had the gall to yell at my husband because he answered the door shirtless. The emergency was that the children walked to the bus stop on the right of way in front of his house. It's a dirt road, no sidewalk, and the other side of the road has a ditch and woods, not suitable for pedestrians. Mr. C made threatening noises about teaching the girls a lesson about staying out of his yard, and my husband lost his religion, informed the old fart that the right-of-way extends 40 feet from the centre of the road, per Georgia law, and that the old man better never, ever fuck with his children. The only other time he ever spoke to me was to complain that the noise from a cookout we'd had. I told him that if he continued, I would have my timber cut, but only that between his house and the highway. Then we'd talk about the noise. And violinist Rich says, I had a neighbour who literally thought she owned the actual street and had some big beef with my landlord. She had sued him several times for things that never made any sense. My landlord installed cameras because she took him to court so often and he needed proof that she was making stuff up. She would mark down that the time that I or any friends of mine arrived or left my house would sit in her driveway watching us. Once my landlord was going out of town and told me I was welcome to use his grill and have friends over. He lived next door to me. I did so, invited maybe 5 friends max, and we had a nice mellow cookout. No loud music, no drunken debauchery or anything like that. True to form, the nosy neighbour called my landlord and told him she was calling her lawyer and threatening legal action over our small party. Thankfully, my landlord had footage of our gathering and deemed it all totally fine and completely within the bounds of what he'd invited me to do. She sucked. Fuck you, Sandra. I love it when they end with something like that. And Rare Stereo Cat said lived in a neighbourhood for about a year that was also home to one of the city council members. This bitch would send notices to everyone for anything she didn't like, and she'd try and sway the council to crack down on those she seemed the worst offenders. We earned a spot on top of her shit list because we put our garbage cans at the curb in the afternoon rather than the evening. None of us were going out after dark and dealing with rats springing out the cans like tiny flea-ridden missiles. We didn't stop because legally we weren't doing anything wrong. She was a stickler for making the neighbourhood look fabulous, even though most of the houses were in shitty condition, and as mentioned earlier, the entire city had, probably still has, a really bad rat problem. So every week we'd get a new notice from her, though she always tried to say it was from the council as a collective. Yes, she hand-delivered that shit. And Satan's chap says, oh, this is my time to shine. Had a neighbour who was old and had bipolar episodes. My neighbour changed the locks on our communal door, which only allowed access to our flat and her flat, yet refused to inform us that she changed the locks. She then refused to answer the phone to us or let us in, then called the police on my partner when he broke in for breaking and entering, and also tried to get us to pay for the new keys. Same neighbour called the police on me when I was in the bath. I don't know what she said to the police, but answering the door to armed police while in a towel was not fun. Her reasoning for calling the police was that she thought I was being attacked and wouldn't answer the door when she knocked. I didn't hear her knock and I was in the bath the whole time, so unsure what exactly she heard. Same neighbour also called the fire brigade to our property twice, claiming we had purposely started the fire in our flat. Both times my partner and I were at work and had to come home to check that there was in fact no fire. We couldn't get Wi-Fi installed in our flat, top floor, but our neighbour, bottom floor, could, so we shared ours, the Wi-Fi bill 50-50. Neighbour would turn the Wi-Fi off if we pissed her off, if she went away for a few days, if she wanted to spite us. She would change the password and then demand more money for us to change it back. When she moved out, we cleared out her flat and found letters from the internet company. She literally took our money but never paid the actual bill. I don't know why they let her have internet for so long, but alas. Same neighbour filled up our own outside bin, then called the council to complain we're overflowing our bin. The council believed her and provided an enforcement notice for causing waste in a communal area. Also, not petty but proves how much of a dick she was. My partner asked our landlord for a private post box as our post and takeaways kept getting stolen from the building with only 2 flats in. Landlord said no because only us and the neighbour lived there. Neighbour denied ever stealing our post and takeaways. Said neighbour was then arrested a week later for selling fraudulent tarot readings online, but then the police arrested her. They also found my partner's bank card, which we assumed just never got delivered, and many other items that were addressed to us. Police did not prosecute because apparently could not prove that she actually stole them, even though they were in her flat. Fuck you, Jane. And French Kid says, water people were out checking meters. Water guy asked where our meter was. Showed him where it was at. Butt picker neighbour comes out of his house hollering to the world that it was his meter and I was not to touch it. We shared the in-ground meter thingy, 2 separate meters. Water guy had a good laugh and instructed the neighbour that it was indeed where my meter was. Neighbour was embarrassed at his own behaviour and went back into his house but watched us for a bit. They were sorta weird. Always remember that they smelled like dirty bed sheets. Very descriptive there. And GingerSnap9210 says bought and moved into a condo and the previous owners apparently did not like cleaning. My 3rd floor deck was green and growing things, so went to my downstairs neighbours to let them know I wanted to power wash. Note, nothing in condo bylaws prohibits this. First neighbour says of course, do whatever I need, but neighbour below me pitches a royal fit. How dare I inconvenience her? She'd have to move her furniture inside. Decks get dirty, that's just how it goes. So I talk to the office, as does she, and she whines enough to get them to say no power washing, but I can use a garden hose and scrub brush, and, important later, soap. While we would have been a 15-minute power wash becomes an all-day cleaning extravaganza of green soapy grossness going down to her deck. But is the neighbour satisfied? Oh no, she did not realise soap would be part of the deal. She is not pleased and come Monday morning is complaining to the office again. Thankfully, they told her to shove it. Runner-up prize goes to the unknown neighbour who ran to the office as I was moving in to tell on me for having a doormat, which is, as I later learned, prohibited. Oh my god, is this HOA stuff? It's got to be HOA, isn't it? Oh my word. And Foglight says, I currently have a neighbour who blares his music so loudly it rattles my entire apartment. He's had numerous lease violations against him, hasn't paid his rent since last March, and thinks somehow he is punishing the apartment complex instead of everyone around him. Luckily, the housing courts open back up soon, and he has a date set for next month. The eviction moratorium has also made it really hard to get people into housing courts for other reasons. I would be glad when I no longer get home from work and see him chugging Keystone Ice outside at 8 in the morning while he's blaring music out of 2 DJ speakers. I'm gonna have to look up what Keystone Ice is, I haven't got a clue. I assume it's some sort of beer or something. And Holy Bull 79 says, we had a small dirt driveway in our front lawn, which was shaded by our giant tree. The neighbours liked to park there because they always had people over and apparently it was too difficult for them to park near their house. When I got my horse trailer, gooseneck, so think long, it was a lot easier for me to park in front so I could just load up and go. One day I come out and see my tyre is slashed on the trailer. I looked up and they were laughing. Joke was on them, they thought I could buy a new tyre, but I couldn't, so that trailer didn't move for months until I could. Bubblegum1286 says, called CPS on my family because we took a family vacation with our 2 older kids and let our youngest with special behavioural needs and violent outbursts spend the week with my mum. They did movies, swimming pools, children's museums, a food truck festival and fireworks show together in that time. He had a blast and the rest of us got some badly needed respite. Neighbour thought it was blatant favouritism and reported us. And Paco says, spent thousands of dollars removing 2 very large trees from our property. About a month later, the neighbour sent us certified mail claiming one of the trees we did not cut down was not healthy. Of course, this was not true because we had all the trees inspected before removal. Because they sent us certified mail, it forced us to get an umbrella insurance policy to cover the event of the tree falling on their house. They never had one face-to-face conversation with us about it. When the fuck did people stop acting like neighbours? Buffer comes in saying, well, let's see, he anonymously reported my trailer to the HOA and then asked to borrow it. His dog chewed up my son's archery target after the neighbour asked to borrow it and then he didn't offer to replace it. He never in 8 years replaced a fence picket even though his kids were busting them and it was a shared fence line. He would dump his grass clippings on our property. He would borrow things and return them empty or broken. Man, now that I put it in writing, I'm glad that dude moved. Misfit471 says, when I was a kid we had a crazy old cat lady that would take our newspapers every day, so my mum thought it would be a great idea to sabotage an old newspaper by wrapping it up in dog shit, mustard, sauerkraut, dirt, basically anything we could find in hopes that she'd stop taking them. We planted the newspaper and woke up to it being gone. Even after all of that, she still fucking took it after that. The dedication told us she deserved it. Lol. And Public Servant Guy says, interesting story, kinda long, but here goes. When I was growing up, 40 years ago, we moved out the projects to our first house. Well, it was a fixer-upper, and we did the work ourselves, etc. I was 10 at the time, and we got a dog, a wonderful black lab. Well, my dad's birthday comes, his 40th, and my uncle decides to get him a goose as a joke gift. Yes, a live male white goose. Well, geese are not nice birds in general, and having a black lab with geese is, well, not intuitive. A bird dog with birds. Lol. Well, we had built a doghouse in our yard, but our dogs were always indoors and never lived outside. So it was an unused thing we were going to make into a goose house. So my uncle lets this goose in our yard, and the dog goes right for it and chases it into that goose house. He turns and struts back to us saying how good I am, to us, but the goose, not to be outdone, shoots out the house and bites down on the dog's tail with its beak and will not let go. So here is the black lab yelping around the yard, flying at full speed with a goose in tow. Eventually the goose lets go, and strangely enough after that, the goose and dog were best friends, and I do mean best friends. Later in life the dog got out when an idiot left the gate open and a car, driven by a scumbag, hit the dog, dislocating his hip. The dog needed surgery and a pin in his hip. Well, when the dog came home from the vets, he went out on our back porch to lay with his injured hip, which was wrapped up in the nice warm sunlight. So he does this, and the goose comes half walk, half fly up the steps and sits down right next to the dog and spreads a wing over the dog's hip. I kid you not, they laid like that every day for weeks, made the papers and everything. Anyway, my dad saw an ad for a free female white goose in the paper, so he gets it, and sure as shit, they laid eggs and we had 3 babies. Huey, Dewey, Louie? How original, I know, but all the neighbours' kids would come by and feed the geese. People loved them, but one neighbour, this old dirtbag, decided he didn't like people walking by his property. So he filed a suit, and the town made us have to get all abutting neighbours' permission to keep the geese, which of course this arsehole wouldn't do. So we ended up giving the geese away to a bird sanctuary 5 states over. They sent a truck and we paid like $300 to have them come get them. 2 months after he forced them to leave, he sold the house and moved away. Still would have loved to punch that guy right in the face. Oh man, and what a sad one to end on, that goose and the dog's friendship to be broken up like that. Oh man, I wish it didn't have to end on that one. But alas, here we are. I hope you did enjoy these petty neighbour stories. You know what I'm like, I love neighbour stories. I've really got into them just recently and I just can't stop reading them. I'm pretty much addicted at this point. If you have your own petty neighbour stories, don't forget to share them in the comments below. I love to hear them. And just thank you for spending 20 minutes or so out of your day here with the channel. It means the absolute world. Thank you so much for your love, support and time, and I will see you in the next one, hopefully. Much love, guys.
I've been thinking that I can't let you go. Hey, can you hear that?